I'm John Brofonsky. I'm the Chief of Police here in Bedford, Vice President of BeBold. And on behalf of all the BeBold folks, all the volunteers that work for BeBold, bringing important, informative information and presentations to all of you. Some of you have been here for a number of these throughout the year, and we applaud you all for coming, especially the young folks here tonight. We have a special guest tonight. Being someone who's been in law enforcement for almost 40 years, 27 with DEA, and dealing with substance abuse and drug addiction for 27 of my professional 40 years career in law enforcement, I can speak to some great depth and clarity about substance abuse addiction and what people have gone through based on the lens that I've seen it through their eyes. But there is no one better prepared, there is no one capable of talking about substance abuse and addiction than someone who has traveled that road themselves, someone that has been there, someone who's walked through that door, someone who has met virtually every life's tragedy as a result of addiction and has lived to talk about it. There's been, I just calculated the statistics just the other day for a document that I was preparing for the police department. Since 2013, 1,876 people, 1,876 people have died in the state of New Hampshire as a result of addiction and drug overdoses. That's greater than the population of more than 50 towns and communities in the state of New Hampshire. 1,876 people. They're no longer with us, but the people that have survived and have gone through the travails and tragedies associated with addiction can share with you in a much better way, with a much more greater degree of clarity, especially for the young people, what making those choices means to you. And so here, I just want to give you a visual representation of who you're going to see tonight. This is a booking photograph from the Bedford Police Department of the arrest of this particular individual who's going to talk to you tonight. So you'll be able to make the determination between that photograph that was taken some years ago and the person you're going to see before you tonight. I can't tell you how brave and how strong this individual is to be able to, A, go through this set of issues and tragedies and challenges in her life, but also how brave she is to be able to stand up in front of you tonight and tell you her story through her own eyes, through her own life. And to be able to do that is so incredibly important on someone who still each and every day has to deal with addiction and substance abuse as part of her life. So without any further introduction, I want to introduce to you a Bedford resident, a former Bedford High School student, someone who's been more than 1 year in recovery, who came to see me on her anniversary of her first year of recovery, right? Yeah. Jenna Collins. Yeah. Don, good to go.
Thank you all so much for coming. I'm extremely nervous. This is crazy. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, what it was like growing up here in Bedford. What happened and how I got to, where I am today. So, I moved here when I was about 5. I went to Bedford schools. I played sports here. I was a dancer. I played soccer, softball. I was a cheerleader. I was just your average kid. I was really shy when I was a kid. I never wanted to leave like my mom's side. And you know, I was decent in school. I got pretty good grades when I was younger. Going into middle school, things started to change. I didn't really like who I was. I had no self-esteem. I wanted to be everyone else besides me. I was like a chameleon. Like I could fit in with any group of kids. The kids who played sports, the kids who, you know, whatever it was, I could fit in with anybody. I had friends, but I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. Like I never belonged with the friends that I had. I always gravitated towards the kids that were doing the wrong thing. It was about 7th grade. I was probably 11 or 12, and I started cutting. It was like a way to release the pain for me, and I don't even know what pain I was really trying to release. I came from a good home. I had good parents, you know, 2 brothers, and there was just something that like wasn't right. My parents got me into therapy, and you know, I was on medication from a young age, and things just, they weren't right. You know, I cut for a long time, and it began to stop. In my freshman year of high school, right from the start is when things got really bad. I think it was my first week of freshman year. You know, I brought a Nalgene bottle of alcohol to school, and I was drinking it at school. It was as easy as that. Nobody knew. It was clear. It was in the water bottle. And that became a almost daily thing for me. I was obviously caught, but I didn't care. Authority was like nothing to me. I'd be suspended. I'd have in-school suspensions. It didn't matter. I didn't care about school. I had a boyfriend who had dropped out and started doing pills, and I would do anything to, you know, be with him, so I didn't want to go to school. I started doing pills. You know, there was nothing that I was going to let get in my way from stopping me from doing what I wanted to do. You know, my parents filed chins petitions on me more than once. They thought it would control me. It didn't. Nothing was controlling me. By the time I was 17, I had been to 3 juvenile placements. I was on juvenile probation, and I had been to multiple outpatients for kids with substance abuse issues. I was angry. I was very angry. There was nothing that my family did or didn't do that made me, you know, the way that I was. They did everything they could. I had everything I needed, everything I wanted. You know, I was that kid that, you know, would go over to my friends' houses and, you know, go through your medicine cabinets and take whatever you had that, you know, would tell me that I would make me drowsy, or, you know, that was me. And I just, you know, I didn't care. Like, I didn't care that I was hurting you or stealing from you. Like, that was just what I did. When I was 16, I put a needle in my arm for the first time. And I think that's when things really took off for me. I was house sitting for somebody's cat and took a number of pills from them was caught and arrested for that. And there was a girl I was friends with at the high school, and she overdosed and nearly died, and I was expelled from high school. I was sent to another school to try to get my diploma, and I tried to clean up a little bit there. I was still drinking, still doing pills. I ended up getting into this awful, awful relationship where I was so beat down. I wanted to do nothing besides block out the pain, and all I did was use and drink. And it was an abusive relationship, emotional, physical, and all I just wanted to do was use and drink just to block that out. And I did end up getting a diploma from the school I went to, surprisingly, and you know, I thought that once I had gotten my high school diploma and graduated and all that things were just going to get better. Like, I had a diploma now I was like 18 and like an adult, and I was just going to be able to put everything down and move forward. But like, that wasn't the case. Like, things, you know, things progressively kept getting worse. Like, it doesn't, you know, it does not get better, and it does not get easier. I would gravitate towards the bad people. I tried so hard to get out of that relationship and couldn't. I found somebody else who got me out of that relationship, I'd say, but enticed me with drugs. And that's where all, you know, my legal issues started. And, you know, I started doing some serious things to support my habit. You know, I think back now and like, there's nothing that like my parents like did or didn't do that could have like helped me or stopped me. Is they just loved and supported me, which I believe to this day, like, I'm alive because of that. I ended up going to jail when I was 19 or 20. And I told myself, I'm gonna go to jail, I'm never gonna do drugs again. This is, you know, crazy. This is not what I want. You know, of course I got out, and I got out on an ankle bracelet for 6 months, and I thought I was changing my life and finding things that worked for me to keep me sober. And the day the ankle bracelet came off, I was high again. I just thought that it wasn't for me. Like, how I was supposed to live was drinking and drugging, and like, that was how I was supposed to live, and I was gonna die that way. And, you know, that was it. I didn't deserve the life that like my brothers had, and, you know, that my cousins had. Like, I didn't deserve that. Like, that wasn't the life that like I was supposed to have. My parents tried to send me to multiple treatment centers. I'd do good for a period of time. You know, I'd come out and I'd use again. I was running around the streets of Florida for a little while using, and you know, sometimes I'd just go to treatment to avoid the legal problems, because I thought that if I go to treatment, then, you know, they'll overlook the legal issues and be like, oh, she's doing well, you know, she's in treatment, she's doing the right thing. You know, but that's not how it is. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay sober. And it got to a point where every morning I'd, you know, wake up and my skin would crawl. I did not want to wake up. I wished that like last shot would kill me. I wished that I, you know, would just die. Like, I did not want to wake up. Waking up was painful. Like, moving my feet was painful. Like, everything was just so painful that I still remember the pain today. And, you know, it's something that like I never want to go back to, and I don't wish it for anybody. And you know, just got to that point where I was like, am I gonna live like this every single day for the rest of my life? Like not being able to get out of bed unless I have a substance to like get me going? Like, is this what my life is gonna be like? Because like what it looks like now is like, that's what it is. And you know, it's just, I would get in and out of programs and in and out of recovery, and I'd have put some sober time together, and I wanted it so bad, but I couldn't do it. And you know, the drugs had their, you know, claws in my back. And I had a big wake-up call when I was sentenced to prison. I did 16 months in prison, and part of my sentence was a therapeutic community program within the prison. And that program was mainly to really take a look at yourself and like your self-esteem and, you know, your worth. And when I look back, I really think that program was an eye-opener for me, and really helped me, you know, see certain things that I didn't see before. You know, I've lost so many people to this disease. I lost somebody that I really cared about when I was in prison, and I lost a lot of friends. And I wish I could say that when I got out, I stayed sober, but I didn't. I had a relapse like 5 days later, and I just remember sobbing, and like I was in, like my knees were in a snowbank, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? I just spent a year and a half in prison, and I'm doing this again. Like, what am I doing? Like, and I remember I went home that night, and I like begged, like I fell to my knees and I begged for help. And I had wanted it so bad. And I would do anything. I said I would do anything to get it, to get, you know, the happiness that I seen people have. And I knew that like I deserved it at that time. I didn't know how to get there. And so I started, you know, I started doing things, taking suggestions that people told me to take. And slowly, you know, but surely things started happening for me. And you know, I haven't picked up a drink or a drug since March 22nd, 2017. And thank you. And to me, like, you know, that's just, you know, a miracle, because for the number of people that I see dying every single day, and the number of people that I know that have died, you know, like when I look at like some of you, like all of you young kids, like I remember like being your age, and like if I could do things over, like I would do certain things over. It's just, all of you have like such an amazing life ahead of you. It's just not worth it. You can have so much fun without the drink and the drugs. Like I had my first sober New Year's this year, and it was like a blast. Like I remembered it, and that's like a gift. You know, being able to do fun things, like, you know, drinking doesn't make things fun. You know, like you don't need to drink to have a good time, and or drug, or, you know, smoke weed, and, you know, that's just, it's just like a gift that like I can live that life today. And, you know, if anyone is in the midst of struggling, there is a way out. You don't have to live in pain. You don't have to suffer. You know, people always say, oh, the odds of somebody getting sober are, but it really is, like the truth is, it comes from like within you. Like anybody can do it. It's just, you have to want it. Like it comes from within you. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Good?
Yeah.
job. Okay. You want to sit or do you want to
Yeah,
stand?
I'll stand. I can stand.
You want to stand or sit?
I can stand.
So, again, what a brave individual to come up here and to talk about that in a personal way. But before we turn it over to questions, I have some few questions for you. I know, even though it's tough for you folks to figure this out, but I can still remember how it was to be in middle school and high school. It's a stretch, I granted, but I can still remember. And so I want to ask you, Jenna, to speak to the young people in the audience about, and I know you said that life is so much different now, right? But when you're in middle school, when you have all these challenges and you're a freshman and sophomore in high school, and you have all these competing interests with friends and groups and cliques and the anxiety that comes with just being a young person in today's world, tell these kids what you would do differently, other than the obvious, right?
Yeah.
How would you approach it differently today than you did a few short years ago?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with, telling people where you're at, and like asking for help and saying like, this is where I'm at. What can I do? What can we do to help where I'm at? So you don't get yourself into a jam. I would say that because there was a lot of times that, when I look back now, like what I would have done different, like there was a lot of times I sat in silence and suffered, where I probably could have just used my words and reached out and said, listen, this is what's going on. I need help, in this aspect, or this is what's going on here. Like, can you help me? And would have like done so much, a world of difference, and I just didn't. I kept silent to myself and I suffered, and it caused me a lot of pain. So I would say there's nothing wrong with asking for help and going to people.
So talking to young people today is important in that you should talk to other people and ask for help, right?
Right.
Talk about what you're feeling and what would you say to us adults, right, about who you could talk to? I mean, what should we do better to help folks like you, kids like you, back in those middle school and formative high school years, to help, to make sure that you come forward? What can we do?
Well, I think that, when I look back, like when I was younger, I think a lot of things for me were like ignored. The struggles that, like, granted I stayed silent, but the times where I did call out for help in like inappropriate ways, it was ignored. So I feel like it's really important that if you see, your children's behavior, like acting out in a different way, or if they do just come to you and ask for help, do not ignore them. Talk to them and do what you can to help them, because ignoring their needs is probably one of the worst things that you could do.
So that brings me to the next set of questions, and that is, now talk to the parents. Talk to the folks out there with young people, young kids, and tell them, beyond listening to their kids, what to look for. I mean, everyone out there is looking for that magic bullet of what's the sign, or what are the signs, or what do I do, what do I see? Help them through that process, because that's what they're looking to try to figure out.
Like when they are maybe starting to pick up?
Exactly, yeah.
I definitely say, self-mutilation might be one, because I know that's what started for me. Anger, definitely anger. I was very, very angry, violent, very violent. Mood swings, isolation is a big one, depression. It's really hard to kind of go unnoticed. Yeah, you know, losing weight, it's just really hard to go unnoticed. Now that I look back and see, it's pretty.
So one of the things, and we've talked about this before, one of the interesting things you told me was that when you were drinking alcohol, right, that no matter where it was locked up in the house, you could still figure out how to get to it. And so if you have a kid in the house who is going through these types of behaviors, right, and there's alcohol in the house, and you know that you could get to it no matter what, lock it up, put it in the safe, you're going to figure out a way to get into it. And I think you kind of left us with the idea that you just got to get out of the house, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's a will, there's a way.
My parents had a padlock on our garage and our refrigerator, or on the refrigerator in our garage, and I got into it. I would unscrew it. I would use a hammer to get in there. I got in when I wanted to get in. They want to get in, they're going to get in.
And the other thing, before I open it up to the audience, is that we've talked before about my experience in talking to folks who've survived addiction, and like you, and have come to talk about it. And the universal thing that we kind of shared was that you have, and you said it before, it has to come through within. And only that individual, you've talked to people, and you told me a tragic story of talking to a young lady as part of your other job there, right, as recovery coach, and she didn't make it. And it has to come from within, right? Mm-hmm. It has to be that person's definitive moment, which for you came, and then you made that change. Mm-hmm. And so is it to tell parents to say, just keep trying, keep giving opportunities until they reach that moment?
I would say, yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, never give up on your kids. You know, I look back now, and, you know, there were so many times for me, like when my parents, you know, they did enable me and everything, but, you know, there were times where I should have literally been on the street for the things that I did. And they just couldn't do it. And, you know, maybe I wouldn't be standing here if they had put me on the street, like where I should have been. And I mean, I think that in order to get through something like this, you know, you need love and support. You need to be like carried through like by people that love and care about you, because nobody can do something like this on their own. Like it's way too painful and hard, and you're already alone and suffering as it is, and nobody can get through something like this alone. And to keep, you know, trying and never giving up on your child is definitely.
So that's an important thing,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of competing notions out there that, well, yeah, right, you should have been on the street, but your parents stuck with you, right? Mm-hmm. And so congratulations, and I know your parents are here, so congratulations and a hand to them for not giving up on you, for continuing, right? Continuing to work with you, giving you multiple opportunities until you came to that white light moment yourself and decided this is not the life to lead, right? And so there's one other thing, and I know there's some legislators here, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but when it comes to the criminal justice system, which is not effective when it comes to dealing with addiction treatment, other than, we hope, limiting or eliminating access. But in talking to you, I know that even in prison, people were getting high and overdosing, right? So to the legislators out there and to any other executives, listen, we're not helping ourselves here in the criminal justice system if we can't provide a space and a location and eliminate, right, drugs and other substances from coming into the jails, to give those programs that you said really started you thinking down a different pathway, right? A chance to work. Because it's not going to work if you're overdosing in prison,
Right.
right? All right, so we have time for questions and answers, and if you raise your hand, I'll come over to you, give you the mic so we can capture it, and we'll start. So, easy one right here.
So, what would you say to kids when they are being peer pressured into drugs?
Good question.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, what do you say to kids that are feeling peer pressure to do drugs? Right? Okay.
You know, it's easy for me to stand here now and just say no. But I know, you know, obviously it's you know, not that easy for kids now just to say no because they're worried about, you know, what their friends are going to think or what other people are going to think. But, you know, I would think about, you know, if you were, or you know somebody who's being peer pressured, think about, you know, stories like these. And, you know, think about, you know, what you want, you know, in life, and just say no. You know, you can just say no, and you're the better person for saying no.
It's about hopes and dreams, right?
Yeah.
It's about a life ahead,
you can
right?
do whatever you want. Just don't do drugs.
Take a question from back here.
I don't know if this mic is on.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that you are probably saving a lot of lives, so keep on doing what you're doing. I really appreciate that, and it's awesome. It's scary. Wondering if part of your recovery had anything to do with Narcotics Anonymous, the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Did any of that
Yes,
help you
I
out?
work AA.
Has reconnecting with the folks that put you in that picture helped at all?
Yeah, I mean, no, it definitely has.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought that I would, but you know, it definitely has. You know, I don't even remember that picture being taken. But yeah, no.
You don't remember, but I was there that day.
I don't remember.
That's right.
But it's been a you know, I was saying to my mom, you know, I can't believe that, you know, I'm doing this, you know, like they hated me and like I hated them and like this is crazy. And you know, yeah, it's just it's really crazy to be able to do things like this and, you know, not have to like look over my shoulder all the time like, am I going to get arrested? You know what I mean? It's just a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Question from over here. Anybody from over here?
I don't need a microphone.
Okay.
Would you say self-esteem was the biggest factor in why you went down that path?
And the question was, do you think self-esteem is one of the bigger factors that sent you down that path? Yeah.
I think it definitely was one of the bigger factors. Having low self-esteem and no confidence, and also really little respect for myself. Yeah, I would say that's definitely a big thing. I just hated everything about myself. Like I literally wanted to change everything down to from being blonde, I dyed my hair black. Like I hated everything. Yeah, that was a big thing.
And so let me ask you this question. Is it unusual for kids in middle school, and I had two daughters go through middle school, so I kind of lived through that period. That's not all that unusual to have middle school kids and freshmen and sophomores to think that way, right? No. It really isn't, right?
Because every kid goes through phases, so it's really not. But, you know, obviously to an extent, you know, they're, you know, to an extent.
So we've had some other discussions about how anxiety and stress on young people kind of affect what happens to them, right? Mm-hmm. And you said that, you know, cheerleader into sports, earlier years had good grades, right? Was that self-imposed need to be successful a factor in kind of what led to those other changes? Yes? No? Could be no? Could be yes.
I mean, yeah. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Because we know that anxiety is a factor
Right.
in young people in substance abuse, right? And sometimes it's self-imposed, sometimes it's imposed by parents, and sometimes it's a combination, right? And it's not that parents intentionally do it or that kids intentionally do it. It's just part of the fabric of society that we live in today, where there's so much pressure on young people to do well in sports, to do well in academics, to have a busy, compact schedule, right? And then you look for, and then couple that with, I don't like who I am right now, and you look for ways to escape that.
Like, I always tried to be, like, measured up to be good enough for other people, and, like, never, you know, myself. So, when I look back, like, as long as I was, like, good enough for me, like, that was okay. But, like, I always tried to be, like, whether it was good enough for, like, my parents or good enough for, whoever else, and I could never, meet up to, I feel like, those standards, and it was never satisfying, and it was just so draining trying so hard to meet up to these standards that I feel like I couldn't meet up to, and it's just...
Trying to measure up to self-imposed or other standards, and again, that's part of society. That's who we are in America, and to a certain extent, it's not a healthy thing, right?
No.
No, it is not. Question.
One of the things we talk about a lot is the light switch, and how you probably had lots of friends that could drink and be fine. What was that light switch for you? Was it alcohol? Was it marijuana? And did you walk around with your friends and say, how come they can be fine and have a couple of beers at a party and I go this direction?
Like, where did I realize that I was probably different? I think I kind of always maybe knew that I was different, but I never thought that it was going to be to the extent of where it was. I knew the first time I experienced detox was when I knew that something was, because I didn't know what I was experiencing, and I actually I remember looking up online what was going on with my body. I was coming off of, like, Oxycontin, and I was puking, and I couldn't even see, and I remember laying in the back of my mom's car just so sick, and I was like, what is going on? And I looked it up, and I was like, oh my God, like, I haven't had these drugs in a day. I'm detoxing. I was like 16. I was like, I have a problem. But I was like, it'll take care of itself when I'm an adult. So I kept doing it, and it doesn't.
And by then, right, it's too late,
Yeah.
right? And that's the issue for all young people and for adults as well, because we don't know, right? Nobody knows. You're a test pilot when you go through that door. You went through the door and you couldn't turn back. There's other people that can go through the door and turn back. But you don't know if your kids will go through that door and turn around and come back and say, I can survive this. But there's some people, 1,876 didn't in the state. Thank God you're one of the ones that did, right? But you don't know. And so that's a great question. Who do we have for questions? Yeah.
On the floor. Hi. Well, the camera. Hi, Jenna. Thank you for being here this evening. So I have a question. Chief had mentioned earlier that we have, laws in place and legislators here. I'm just curious, as you look back at your expulsion from high school, do you feel as though, looking back, that was helpful, harmful, or indifferent? And if you could explain a little bit how you feel, that would be really helpful.
And this will not affect your final grade, by the way.
In a way, I want to say that it was helpful for me. And I don't know if that obviously probably isn't the case for everybody. But for me, I think I needed to be removed from, you know, the kids that I was around, and just be put somewhere else. And granted, like, the drugs didn't stop, but it was just, the environment was different. It was smaller. You know, for someone like me who just had a really hard time in school in general as I got older, I think it was helpful. You know, for me, in a sense, as weird as that is to say, I think it was helpful.
One thing that people have told me that have gone through addiction, people that we've arrested and come back out through the other side, like Jenna has said, that if I didn't go to jail, I'd still be using, I'd probably be dead, right? Even though there's drugs in jail, the likelihood, and other people have told me, that if you didn't arrest me and give me an opportunity to make a change, then I wouldn't have made it. And maybe you had friends that didn't. So access is important. Questions? Yes.
Do you think that your time in jail and hitting rock bottom in jail kind of is what helped you get clean? Or do you think, again, going back to legislators and the laws, would it have been better to be sentenced to a treatment center opposed to a jail cell?
I don't know. I think for everyone's situation, it's probably different. Because I had been to multiple treatment centers prior to going to prison, so, and clearly none of them had worked for me. Like, I used them as like vacations just to clean up for a little bit, and before I go back on the street and get high again. I think for some people, I don't know, you know, being in there, like, it bought me like time to like reflect on, you know, so much. And, you know, I got a great deal of letters from like family and everyone just telling me like how like I was and like what they like missed about me like off drugs, and like what they wished for me for the future. And like I got to like reflect on that stuff, and I had a great deal of time. I had like 16 months to reflect on all that. And you know, like getting one thing that like, you know, I'll never, that still sticks with me, and I, you know, I share this with friends, and like I share this with people sometimes. You know, my youngest brother wrote me a letter when I was in there, and, you know, he told me, I forget kind of how he worded it, but, you know, one thing that was gonna, that he like missed, you know, I just missed some stuff with his like sister, and the one thing that he'll never forget is when, you know, he opened my bedroom door and saw me like lifeless and like blue, and he, I can't, I'm sorry. I knew what I was going to say, but now I don't remember.
It's tough to carry.
Yeah.
It's tough to carry that kind of burden in that, you know, your brother, he feels maybe is scarred, if you will.
Yeah, like getting stuff like that, like I had a lot of time to reflect on everything, all the damage and everything that like I did, and like, you know, being in treatment, you don't have that much time. They don't give you that much time. So I had like, you know, a whole year and a half to reflect on things that they said, and like that letter, like I thought about that for a full year and a half, and, you know, what that did to him, and like certain things that really like affected them. Like no younger sibling or mother or father should have to see that. Like no one. And yeah, I had a lot of time to reflect. So to answer your question, I don't know, for me, I think it might have helped me. I think it saved my life.
And just to back up what Jenna said, the other people have said the same thing. You know, don't expect a cure in jail,
Right.
but it buys you time. And that's what it really does. And for Jenna, there was a program in jail that started you down a different path. Not completely effective in jail, but was ultimately, I think what you're saying, led you to make some other changes ultimately, even after you got out, right? So, what do we have back here? Oh, oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Who
You gotta
or
wave.
who or what introduced you to the idea of using alcohol as a coping method? Like, what initiated you to bring a water bottle full of alcohol to school as like a coping method?
Yeah, what induced her to use alcohol as a coping method in school?
I don't think my initial thought was to use the alcohol as a coping mechanism in school. How I had started and become that was, I had taken it from home and brought it to a friend's house the night before, and I'll never forget it. And we had taken the same bus to school, and she was like, "Oh, you left your bottle," and I was like, "All right, well, can you just take it on the bus and give it to me?" So she did, and I was like, maybe I'm gonna drink this today. And that was my thought, and that's what I did. And then I was like, okay, this works, and I just continued. So it's not like it just kind of happened, and then when I started to do it, I felt like I was taken out of myself, like I was comfortable, like I wasn't uncomfortable, if that makes sense. So drinking, I was comfortable, so I didn't feel uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Thinking that you could stop at any
Right.
time, right?
Right.
And that's the fallacy behind all this, is that bring alcohol to school? Well, I bring it today, but I don't have to bring it tomorrow.
Right.
But then it became, well, yeah, I'm going to bring it tomorrow too.
Right.
And then it becomes,
I felt invisible. Nobody could yeah.
and then it becomes, I kind of have to bring it to school now, right? So that's that kind of pathway that, again, you don't know. You think that I can control this, right? I can control alcohol. I can just stop. For some people, it doesn't happen. So let me put you on the spot a little bit. How easy was it to get drugs and alcohol in Bedford High School? Obviously for you, not so hard, right?
No. It was simple. I can't even tell you how. Just walk in the building, you know what I mean? For me, I would just have a little silk pouch filled with pills, and I had to walk into school. It's easy.
Pretty easy, yeah. You had such a good question before. I'm going to give you another shot.
So as a younger kid, now that you're older, what would you say to, before you started doing drugs, what would you say to yourself?
Wow, you got good ones.
Somebody feeding you those questions? Yeah, what would you say? What would you say to yourself?
So what would you say to your now that you're older, what would you say to your younger self before you started doing drugs?
Now that you're older, what would you say to your younger self to not do drugs?
What would you say to your 12-year-old self or 13-year-old self?
Well, now I would tell myself, looking back, that I'm worth it, that I'm worth a good life, that I can do anything that I want in life. I deserve a life filled with happiness, and I can do whatever I want, whatever I set my mind to. Work hard.
We've got time for maybe 2 more questions. Yeah. Great. Wave some more. That's fine.
Hi, thank you for sharing your story. I just want to know, you said that you suffered from low self-esteem. So what have you done to help you improve your self-esteem? What have you found that helps you?
There's, a number of things that I've done. It's taken a lot. A lot of the work that I've done to build my self-esteem has come through, the 12-step work that I do. In the beginning, as much as it killed me, and I mean literally killed me, I would hate doing it. I'd have to look in the mirror some mornings and tell myself how much I loved myself and that I was beautiful. And I'm telling you, I hated it. And I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. And I had to keep doing it. And eventually it worked. And I'll leave for work some mornings and I never look at myself now and hate myself. And for me to say that is crazy because I hated, and when I mean hated myself, thought I was a disgusting human being, just not worth anything. And now to say that I love who I am and I love what I do, and that I know I have a future. It's taken a lot of work, and I still work on it every day. But yeah.
Great answer. One more question before we have to wrap it up. Where? Oh, wait. Nope. Just scream it out.
Sure. So thank you first for all that you're doing. I'm glad that you found this purpose to help others. But in a room full of parents and educators, we have eyes on, if not our own children, other people's children all day long. You mentioned you had cries for help that were acting out. What a lot of people see that is just oppositional or angry kid kind of stuff. What's the right angle to get at a kid in that situation? And maybe just for yourself, what would have helped?
What would, to approach them?
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing someone who would have approached you might have resisted. What's the right angle?
I think what he's saying is that, when kids act out, right, and for you it was a way to try to transmit, hey, listen, I need some help here, versus the adults are seeing this as, this is just a behavior or a kid that doesn't want to follow the rules, right? I think what he's asking is, how do we differentiate between someone who's just not following the rules versus someone who's asking for help? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, that's so tough because for me, it came from the needing the help. So I don't, from the other angle, just not wanting to follow the rules. I don't know what that would look like. But I think from, a child at a young age who doesn't want to follow the rules and is just, defiant, and I think eventually that's going to lead into poor behavior. So I think that, the end result for both is probably going to be, the drugs and alcohol, because I don't think poor behavior like that, people just grow out of.
So what you're saying then is, forget trying to differentiate it. You have to deal with it as if it's the real thing, as if it is a person asking for help, right? And work with it at that
And then
that
if
level.
it isn't, then great.
Right, there you go.
But yeah, I wouldn't minimize it and assume it's not.
Fair to say? Great. So, any final comments, words? We're at the end of the witching hour here.
I don't think so.
So, just a couple of final thoughts for everyone, young adults as well as teens, parents. We know from science and technology now that there's basically three things that are markers for substance abuse. And when I say substance abuse, it could be alcohol, it could be marijuana, it could be gambling, it could be harder drugs, right? One is neurological predisposition. No one in this room, unless you've been evaluated by our neurodoc, right, and tested, is going to be able to say that you are or are not neurologically predisposed to addiction. So you don't know. The second thing that we know is a marker is genealogy. Is it in your family? Have you been exposed to it? You may or may not know that. It could be in another extended part of your family that you're not aware of. And the third marker is access. You know, when they do studies of the density of liquor stores where there's a certain population and a lower density in the same population, there's a difference in addiction rates. Why? Because it's access. So this is probably one of the most complex human issues that we deal with, right, is addiction. Why? Because it's just not a disease of the individual. In my view, it's a disease of society, because the way that we are in America, we're not sicker than any other country in the world. We're not more or less predisposed neurologically to addiction disorders than other people in Spain or Africa or Asia or any place else. But yet, in this country, we seem to struggle with it more. Why? Because there's a whole range of issues that impact it, some that we know about and some that we don't. Whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's the pressure, the anxiety that we put on kids and adults to achieve some degree of success you call trying to measure up, that you imposed on yourself and trying to compare yourself to other people, which induces stress and anxiety. And just the way that we are, that leads us to this very complex issue where there's no right or wrong answer. But what we do know is that there are incredibly strong, valiant, resilient people like Jenna that are willing to come out to talk about it, willing to come out and share the story, willing to come out and talk to kids not so far removed in age from you that can tell you to avoid ending up looking like that. And she's here to talk about it, and thank God she is. Thank you so much for coming, Jenna. Thanks to your mom and dad. Great job.